Well, hey, all you cool cats and kittens. It's your old pal Jen Lou coming at you on a Tuesday evening talking about true crime and snacks. Hey, y'all, how y'all doing? Let's see who we got in here. Hello, Heather, whatever. Hello, Cement Shoes. Hello, Momo. Hello, Ali79. Hello, Molson Man. Hello, Shamida. Hello, Ali79. Hi. Sorry the intro was a little bumpy there. Yeah, 2. I don't know how many twos there actually are. What is it? 2, 22, 22, 2. No, that's wrong. 2, 22, 2, 0, 22. I got it now. What does that even mean? My husband was asking me about that today. He was like, hey, have you noticed the date? Which, like, the only time he ever asks me stuff like that is if it's our anniversary or maybe his birthday or something, because otherwise, you know, so at first I was like a little taken aback because I was thinking to myself, no, now I may have been confused last week about the days of the week, but I know darn for sure what month it is. And I know this is February. And he was like, so I looked at him and I was like, oh, the 22222 thing. And he's like, yeah. And he was like, does it mean anything? And I was like, I don't know. I know ones do, but I don't know what twos mean. I don't know. So I don't know if it's special or anything. Maybe it's just, a cool thing because of all the twos. I don't know. But hey, Molson Man, guess what? So I had every intention to watch the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Okay. After I did all my homework, I said I was going to do okay, right? So I did all that stuff, and well, let me just get to that, and then I'll tell you what the and part is. So I put it on the Netflix, and the first thing that shows up is just added. And what do I see? I see Rob Zombie's version of Halloween has been added. So I watched that instead of watching the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So, yeah. Well, I know like all of my kids, and we all have ones and twos in our birth dates, like in the month and the day. And then my husband's and my birth date is exactly the same numbers. It's not the same day or anything. It's just the same numbers. So yeah. But I'm going to watch it, Molson Man, and I need for you to, if you wouldn't mind, please email me so that we can work out when to do this, because Shmita sent me the cutest picture today that I want to use for the thumbnail, but I want to show you first so you'll so I can get your approval before I use it. And but yeah, I really want to talk about the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So the other thing that I did today while I was watching trial testimony to see what would be good to talk about was it's about to be chunkla weather here, like all the time again. And my feet were looking like I snatched my meals from large bodies of water. So I did my toes today, and they look adorable. Even though I don't really like feet, I do like to take care of my feet. So when I was listening to trial testimony today, I was skipping, like trying to figure out what would be the best to play today. And so when I was listening to it, after the detective we listened to last night, there was 1, 2, 3, 4 other detectives that testified. I can't stand them, Molson, man. I do not like feet at all. Um, but I take care of mine because I'm, I don't wanna have look, Florida, it's hot all the time. Everybody wears the chunkless, and I can't be rolling around town looking like I snatch my meals from large bodies of water, so I maintain my toes because it's important. Okay, so there were 4 detectives that testified, but I learned something interesting that I think that we all kind of missed, and that is this. So remember how we were talking about how, hey, Amelia Sparkles, um, how we were talking about that there was a time between when Ezra showed up at Don Stipple's house and then them locating Alex Woodworth's body. And I was thinking, hey, Sugar Beet, good to see you. I haven't seen you in a minute. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm glad everybody's here. I love seeing all you guys. But okay, so anyway, all right. So I was listening, right? And I was listening to these detectives testify, and I was thinking to myself, wait, this isn't making sense. So then I go back and I listen to Don Stipple's testimony because I remember very distinctly him saying that he was going to have his morning meal and it was between 4:15 and 4:20, which made me giggle because I'm perpetually a 13-year-old boy. Okay. So then I listened to the detectives again because he said he was there at 3 because they went back out to Don Stipple's house. And I was thinking, how can that be? Well, I'm about to tell y'all how that can be. Because when Ezra showed up to Don Stipple's house, it was March 22nd. When they found Alex, it was March 23rd. That's how. So it was even longer than what we had thought it was. It's a whole 24 hours. So basically, the detectives that we missed were 2 more detectives that do the digital forensic analysis. And the thing is they only talked about doing it. They didn't actually show any like texts or emails or anything like that. There wasn't any evidence. I don't know if they're going to do that at a later point. Yes, Amelia, 24 hours between when when Ezra showed up at Don Stipple's house and he called 911. It was 24 hours later that they found Alex, and it wasn't through her help. I'm going to tell you guys about that. Okay. So now I forgot what I was saying before that. Oh, so they didn't show they didn't show anything from like the Cellbrite or any of that stuff, except for one phone though was in water. And so that was kind of interesting how they have to take the phone apart and they remove the motherboard and then they remove the memory chip and all that. That was kind of interesting, but not like super interesting that it's nothing like riveting. It's just neat that how they do it. Okay. So then what happens is, um, the detectives decide, okay, Ezra is not helping us at all. So they go back to Don Stipple's house and, hey, Lupe. So they go back to Don Stipple's house. They're talking to him and getting some information. And one of the other detectives is sitting in the car in the driveway. And he notices muddy footprints or, footprints in mud is what I should say. And actually what he said was they really looked more like somebody was wearing socks because there was you could see fabric, where the fabric would make an indentation or whatever. Okay. So they start to follow that back. And that's when they come to that isolated road. And then they go up this hill. And that's where, hey, Team Psych Ward, good to see you, babe. And that's where they find Alex's body. And what they did in the meantime while they're waiting is they say, okay, well, it looks like it's about to rain or whatever. So they start preserving the scene as far as like they got box tops and they were covering up all the footprints so that they would be preserved. And hey, Kenny, what's going on? Where's Kenny? What's going on? Yeah. So those detectives, this is what was confusing to me. I had to kind of listen again because I was like, well, if they were at the scene, like, well, what was their capacity? And then I realized that um initially, because they also had gone to Alex's apartment. That's where they started. So they went to Alex Woodworth's apartment looking for him. Okay. And then they went to Don Stipple's house and they sort of worked their way back from following the route or whatever. And that's how they located Alex's body. And I was thinking, well, why then, why aren't they the ones that investigated this? And then I realized that I think that they were assigned the potential SA case and now it's turned into a homicide. And so it would be different detectives. So basically, those detectives that were out there while they waited for all of the crime scene people to come, they secured the scene and did what they could to preserve it and all that business. Okay, so then after the detectives testified, which they really didn't have anything really riveting to say. All right. Then we have Jennifer Morris. Okay. And she's an RN, but she's more than just an RN. She's a Sane nurse. Okay. And, I can't say what Sane stands for because YouTube doesn't like it, but you guys can Google it, So that's what she does. So the first part of her testimony, which I'm not going to play because it's graphic in a way that doesn't actually, how do I put this? Well, she goes through exactly what a Sane exam is, okay? And I mean, like, step by step, there's like 18 steps, okay? She goes through that and she's explaining it. And it's just, I thought that it was a little too much and that it could be triggering to some people. And so I decided, okay, I'm not gonna play that. But Mo has it on her Rottweiler Investigates channel. If Shamita, would you mind? Yes, she was. Um, Shamita, she was admitted to a hospital. Would you mind dropping Mo's link for me, pretty please? Okay, so she's going through all of that, okay? And then at the end of the the first part of her testimony isn't actually that long, although it seems like it would be, because at the her testimony is like, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes, but the last 30 minutes is this argument between the state and the defense over these pictures. So rather than, there are certain pictures that are of the injuries that Ezra had on her body, of a sensitive nature. And so, thank you, babe. Thank you so much. So, rather than put them on display on like the projector or whatever, they agreed that what they would do is to protect her, you know, privacy. I mean, it's a what happened, that no matter what you believe she did, right? That's still, I mean, there's a reason it's called privates, okay? So to protect that, to give her some, you know, grace isn't what quite right the right word, but I can't think of the humanity maybe. Anyway, so what they did was they put all of these pictures in a binder and had a binder for each of the jury members, right? Well, the prosecutor or the defense wanted the some of the pictures, two of them specifically, to be edited even more. Dignity, thank you. Yes, thank you, Shamita. Dignity. I could not think of the word. Protect her dignity. All right. So, because I have none, obviously, which is why I can't think of the word. um. Anyway, so they're having this like argument. I mean, it caused quite a kerfuffle. Okay, because they want a couple of these pictures, the defense does, to be edited even more. And they're like, well, when we did our opening, we used we edited it with the black bar digitally, and why can't we do that again? And da 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 da. And the prosecutor's argument was, look, um, we're all for protecting her dignity and giving her privacy. This is these are photographs of a sensitive nature and then the sensitive area, right? They're on board with this, but their point was that it's important to see what injuries were there, but also what injuries were not there. That was their contention. And so finally what they decided to do was they compromised, and they did edit them, and then they were going to use like they were going to edit one photo with a black marker, okay, and then make copies of it, but that turned into a whole big huge mess, okay, as the copies wouldn't come out. So this is all that happened. I don't even know why I'm telling you guys this. It's just interesting because it caused such a kerfuffle, okay? So anyway, it caused this huge kerfuffle, all right? And they finally bring the jury back in, and they are asking her questions. And some of the stuff that was covered in the first part of her testimony Mo has that on our channel. I'm not going to play it tonight, but some of the relevant and pertinent stuff were that, and this is a very, very interesting argument, is that the way that the prosecution presented it, in my mind, maybe not you guys, but for me, I thought that Ezra did make an essay claim. Well, when the nurse testified, she said that Ezra said she didn't know if she had been essayed. And I thought that that was an important distinction to make. They also note, the nurse also noted the word boy carved into her arm. And she said that Ezra told her that all she could remember was she had been with Jason earlier, the other Jason, not Jason Mingle, but the other Jason, earlier that day. And then she was with Alex Woodward, and he carved the word boy into her arm, and that's all she could remember. And so I kind of thought that was interesting. And then there's going to be some more testimony, but you're going to get to see some pictures that are not from the prosecutor. These were pictures entered by the defense. I mean, they came from the prosecution, obviously, because they're the only ones that would have taken, had these pictures, because it was done at the hospital. But we're going to see a little bit of her finishing up her direct examination, and then we're going to watch the cross examination. And it's actually kind of interesting. And so that's what we're going to watch today. So let me do what I'm supposed to be doing to share the screen. All right. All right. Now, I want to tell you guys that they are, hi Nonstop Mom, they are going to I did, Amelia. I was kind of proud of myself today. I want to tell you guys, they are going to show pictures, okay? They're not, I would not consider them to be graphic. But I'm just wanting to let you guys know. Hold on, I think I have a thing that I can show you guys right quick. See, now Shmita was up here. She would do it. Here we go. There you go. So there is, just there's pictures. And they're not of her, personal areas, but just, it is testimony about, a potential essay. So it might be triggering for somebody. So there's your warning. And now we're going to play the video. All right, here we go.
Okay, please be seated. Okay, Ms. Donovan, then you may continue.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. Before we broke, you talked about how you took photographs during your Sane examination. Is that right?
Yes.
And I'm going to show you Exhibit 174, the binder that I believe contains printed copies of those digital photographs that you looked at. If you could briefly
Hey,
page
Murphy's
through,
Law, welcome.
that binder, and except for the first 2 pages where there's some blacked out section, do their pages, are they true and accurate copies of the photographs that you took?
Oops, I highlighted the wrong one. The rest of the jury is MIA. This is just a solo mission, so that's it. Just me.
On March 22nd, 2018.
Yes.
Move Exhibit 174 into evidence.
Any objection?
No.
All right, Exhibit 174 will be received.
Request to publish the photographs to the jury.
All right, you may publish the photographs to the jury.
Just to clear up some confusion, wasn't the CD actually also, I'm sorry, wasn't the CD actually also number 174? That's what I had in my notes.
You want to come up, Molson
the
Man? You're
CD.
more than welcome to. Hang on, and I'll share the link.
And
Yes, the disc is 174.
so maybe this could be 174B. Yeah.
Okay, so this will be the binder of photographs, then will be referred to as Exhibit 174B. The disc is 174 in the electronic version.
Now I can do it.
Yes, you may.
Oh, I just wanted to point out that Ezra has changed blazers and tops today. And she's going for the librarian / school marm look.
Ms. Morris, if you could turn to the first page of 174B. Can you explain for the jury what this is a photograph of?
This is a photograph of the patient's
All right, Molson Man.
perineal area.
But the offer's on the table.
Perineal.
Do you have a spelling for that?
Also, just as a side note, the technical term for the hairdo that Miss McCandless is rocking today is called a chignon. That is the type of the bun that she is wearing, just in case y'all care. You know how I like to I don't really care, but I like to point out random, not necessary itty bitty bits of trivia. Here we go. I'm playing it for real. That's it. No more interruptions.
Perineal.
Perineal. Let me just look. You got it. Okay.
Recorder has it. Okay.
And this first page, DOJ 1127, depict the superficial lacerations that you described in your chart.
Yes.
And if you turn to the next page, Judge, I'm going to object to just the form of the question leading and ask her to ask what it depicts as opposed.
Sorry.
I'm objecting to the form of the question as being leading for the future questions, that they should be done as open-ended, asking what does this depict instead of does it depict.
Okay, I'll just stay on form of the question.
Turning to the next page, DOJ 1128, what does this photograph depict?
This photograph is just a different angle of the same shot of the patient's perineal area in the groin and her right thigh.
And what, if any, injuries are depicted in this?
Those are some superficial lacerations.
Turning to DOJ 1129, what is depicted in this photograph?
Those are the patient's hands, and the right hand shows some abrasions, and then the left hand looks like it's dirty, but abrasions on the right hand.
And so when this photograph is taken and before the or during the Sane exam, the patient had not taken a shower. Is that right?
Correct, she had not taken a shower.
And so this is how she was presented to you when you examined her on March 22nd.
Yes.
Turning to the next page, DOJ 1130, what is depicted in this photograph?
Those are the palm side of the patient's hands, and the left hand has some lacerations, superficial lacerations on the palm side, and the right hand appears to be dirty too.
And then turning to DOJ 1131, what is depicted in this photograph?
That I just used it's the same, it's her hands, the palmar side of her hands, using a ruler to try and gauge the length of the lacerations.
And then turning to the next page, DOJ 1132, what is depicted in that picture?
This is the patient's arm, her left forearm, and in that picture, it looks like there's an IV, like that would be in the anacubital area, and then some superficial lacerations with the word boy, and then a larger laceration on the top.
Okay. And then turning to DOJ 1133, what is depicted in that photograph?
This is the patient's left arm again, just a different angle. Looks like upside down boy. The IV is still in place, and then I just used a ruler again to try and gauge the size of it.
And during your examination, the patient told you that Alex had done these injuries to her arm?
Correct.
And turning to the next page, DOJ 1134, what does this photograph depict?
That is the right thigh. And there's two superficial lacerations there, and then the other lower part is the left thigh.
And DOJ 1135, same photograph with a ruler, is that right?
Correct.
Sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm not seeing a 1134 in my copy. We go from 1133 to 1141, and then there's some loose pictures that begin with 1135. So.
Are the other jurors missing 1134? There's two other books here.
The record was reflected, all jurors indicated that their binder was not missing 1134.
And then DOJ 1135, what does that photograph depict?
That is the right thigh, again with a ruler next to it to try and give you an idea how long it is.
And if you flip that picture over, do you have DOJ 1136?
Yes,
What does that photograph depict?
that is the outer portion of the patient's right thigh. And those are lacerations to the right thigh.
And do you see some darker circular spots in the middle of those superficial lacerations?
Yes,
Do you remember what those were?
that was an area of blood that looked like it came from a smaller one up higher. It was just dried blood.
And turning to DOJ 1137, what does that photograph depict?
That is the same picture, a little bit closer with the ruler to give you an idea of how long it is.
And then if you turn to DOJ 1138, what does that photograph depict?
That is the right side of the patient's neck and like that mandibular, under the mandible area with a pink abrasion.
And again, mandible is the jaw? Is that-
Yes, right underneath that jaw.
And then turning to DOJ 1139, what is that photograph?
That's a picture of the patient. We're always recommended to try and take a picture with her, with the patient's sticker, just to verify that's who it is.
Some previous witnesses described blood around the mouth, and do you know if the patient was cleaned before you met with her?
I didn't see any blood. I know that they had started to try and get her to clean up, but then they stopped, knowing that someone was going to be coming in to do a Sane exam.
And who are you referring to as they?
I'm sorry, the emergency department technicians and the primary nurse who were taking care of her.
Okay, so before you arrived, they started to clean her body and then they stopped.
Yes.
And then turning to DOJ 1140, what does that photograph depict?
Just a different angle of her face, it looks like, with her holding up her patient sticker.
And then DOJ 1141, what is depicted in that photograph?
This is the picture of the abrasion on the right side of her neck underneath the jaw and with the ruler.
Okay, thank you. Did you only take photographs of any alleged injuries that you observed?
Yes,
So if there's no photographs of the left leg, you didn't observe any injuries on that side?
correct.
And if there wasn't any photographs of the right arm, you didn't observe any photographs there, or excuse me, any injuries there?
Yes.
And the decision to do a Sane exam, what was that based upon?
Based on the patient's, when I spoke with the patient, that she had no recollection of what had happened for a couple hours, and her presenting to, I guess, a person's house full of blood. When people have a lapse of memory and they have unknown injuries, how they got them, we're always trying to do what's best for the patient if they can't remember, to try and collect evidence, to give them a chance if their memory does come back, or we find other injuries. But the Sane exam is done, only with consent of the patient too. We can't just go in and collect evidence. She was agreeable to that because she didn't have any recollection of what had happened to her.
And were any tests performed to determine whether there was an actual loss of memory or just an unwillingness to communicate?
Objection. It assumes facts, not an evidence, it's speculative. It implies something that's not true.
All right, well, I guess the question is there any tests? Are there
Judge,
tests?
also, I don't believe such a test even exists, so
All right, well, I'm going to overrule your objection, then perhaps that would be the answer.
Were there any tests that were performed with respect to the patient claiming lack of memory?
No,
And how long were you with the defendant on March 22nd?
I got there around 7 and I was there till about 11.
So approximately 4 hours you were with her?
Correct.
No further questions.
All right, then, Ms. Nolaf, were you going to answer questions about the redaction on DOJ 1127, 1128?
Yes, as far as you were originally reviewed photographs of the first 2 pages of Exhibit 174B. Do you remember that?
Yes,
And you reviewed them without redaction, is that right?
yes.
Due to the redaction, are any injuries or marks being covered up as a result of that redaction, based on your memory?
No,
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, cross-examination.
1 minute, please. Ms. Morris, before you examined Ezra McCandless, she was in the custody of law enforcement officers? That's what you said, right?
I don't know if she was in custody, but law enforcement was present in the emergency department.
Right, in custody would imply she was under arrest. She wasn't under arrest.
No, she wasn't.
But they were seated with her.
They were in the emergency department. When I went into room 8, the room she was in, there was no law enforcement in the room. It was emergency department technician sitting with her, and law enforcement was outside in the hall.
Okay. Were you aware that law enforcement had brought her into the hospital?
The report that I had been given was that she came in by emergency medical services, by ambulance.
And were you aware that there had been either law enforcement officers or emergency medical technicians or nurses or other hospital personnel with her constantly from the time she had come in to the hospital until the time of your examination?
Objection, speculative.
I asked if she was aware. She can answer yes or no.
I'm going to overrule. Go ahead, you may answer.
Yes, I was aware that there were people with her.
Okay. The law enforcement people that you saw there, they were all male, correct?
Objection relevance.
I'm going to overrule. Go ahead. You can answer.
If I remember correctly, yes.
But there were also women, hospital personnel who had been with Miss McCandless. For example, when she went to remove her clothing and put on a hospital gown, she would be accompanied by a female, not a male, of course, from the hospital.
Yes,
Okay. And she also had seen a nurse, a female nurse, before you conducted your examination.
correct.
Now, when you examined her, you asked her if she had used any alcohol or drugs, correct?
Yes,
She told you she had not.
yes.
She reported a high level of pain to you,
She reported being sore in her bottom.
correct? And
Yes.
specifically pain associated with the lacerations that were near the vaginal area, right?
Yes,
But she did not want pain medications.
she did not ask me for pain medication.
Okay, and of course, you've seen people who are drug addicts come into a hospital and ask for narcotics because they're trying to get drugs.
Objection relevance.
Well, I don't know what the relevance is, but
I think it'll be clear with the next question.
okay, I'm going to overrule the objection.
You've seen that happen in your job as a nurse, right?
Yes,
And, people trying to manipulate people by trying to get drugs, right?
yes,
But she didn't do that. In fact, the opposite occurred. She reported pain, but declined pain medication to the best of your knowledge.
yes,
Okay. Now, you also said you collected blood to see if there would be, that can assist to see whether or not a drug has been given involuntarily to a person, correct?
yes,
And you're aware that once the blood is in the vial, it can be tested for voluntary or involuntary substances.
yes,
And certainly the crime lab has the capacity to do that.
yes,
Now, when she talked to you about the pains and cuts that were near her vaginal area, it's fair for us to say this is a really sensitive area of the body.
yes,
And it's not surprising that this would be reported by a patient as being painful.
yes,
And even what you call a superficial laceration, simply because it didn't go deeper, doesn't mean that it wouldn't hit the nerve endings on the skin and be very painful to somebody in that
Correct.
sensitive area, right? I'm going to show you some pictures now. Let me just show them to the state first. All right, I'm going to now show you some exhibits, and we're going to put them on the screen, Madam Clerk. So we're going to start with number 635. These are part of what was previously marked as exhibit number 174, the CD. These are all photos from the hospital, and 174B. Some of these photographs are in 174B and some of them aren't, but they're similar. So the picture I'm showing you is marked here as exhibit number 635. And that is a picture of the side of Miss McCandless's, the right side of her neck, correct?
yes,
And that picture that we're seeing up there, that red mark that you see, that's the red mark you're talking about when you said it was below the mandibular, or in other words, the jawline, right?
yeah, yes,
And that's not a thin line, it's much thicker, correct?
correct.
Now, you've had a number of different patients who come in at different times, sexual assault patients you've examined, who have advised you that an assailant attempted to strangle them, or they frequently use the word choke, even though that's not really technically correct, right?
Correct.
I mean, choking is something that happens on the inside of your throat. But many times when that happens, when a patient reports that, there's no mark necessarily left, correct?
Correct.
Okay, but in this case, we have a pretty clear, distinct red mark, right?
Yes,
And that's why you took a picture of it.
yes,
All right, so even though the patient can't tell you something that happens, that's an important piece of evidence, isn't it?
yes,
All right, I'm going to next move on to what's been marked as exhibit number 636. And Judge, this is also from exhibit 174, the CD. And this is the picture you previously talked about that shows her holding up her name, and that's for identification purposes, right?
yes,
Just kind of like hospital bracelets are for
Right.
identification purposes. And looking at this picture, if you look at her lip on what appears to be our left, but would be her right side, you can see a small cut or laceration to the end of her lip on the right side, correct?
yes,
And there appears to be another laceration to the right of that, which would be to her left, also like what you might call a superficial laceration, correct?
Are you talking on the lip?
Yes,
Right.
on the lip.
It does, yes,
Okay, there's also a small area which is kind of dark colored. I don't know how to use this thing. Here, I'm terrible at these things. I'm going to ask Mr. Nelson to help me. There's a little mark right there that looks like a small scab as well, correct?
Yes,
And you can also, on the bottom side of her chin, very close to the paper, it's a little hard to see, but you can see a red line there as well, correct?
yes,
All right. So fair to say that, these could have been bleeding earlier and been cleaned up by the time you actually saw Ms. McCandless.
yes.
Okay. I'm next going to show you what's been marked as exhibit number 637. This is a close-up of what you previously described as the marks to her leg. And this is particularly to her right leg, correct?
Yes,
And there's an area that you described as dried blood.
yes,
Was it dried by the time you saw it?
yes, it was.
Okay, so if these were noted by somebody as puncture wounds, that would be consistent with puncture wounds, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And there seems to be some other discoloration on the leg there as well, in the area of the top scratches.
I do see that. It looks like it could be blood, but I'm not sure. I didn't chart.
Okay, because that wouldn't necessarily be something you would chart, right?
If I saw it and it was pretty obvious, I should chart it.
Well, I mean, small mistakes happen, right? Blown up photography can sometimes show you more than you're going to see with the naked eye.
Correct.
Okay, so it's, all right. So number 638, I'm going to go to that picture next. And looking at picture 638, this is a picture of the palms of her hands, right?
Yes,
And looking at the palms of her hands, you specifically noted the lacerations, which were to her left hand.
yes,
It's fair to say that both of the hands show quite a bit of redness as well.
yes,
And those are consistent with perhaps falling on a hard surface like a road or gravel.
yes, it could be, but I don't.
You don't know?
No, exactly.
Okay,
I don't know.
but you notice there's definite redness there.
Correct.
Now, you were not shown pictures of Miss McCandless's clothing, right?
I was not.
You never saw the clothing because before you got there, it was marked in bags.
Yes,
So if the clothing corresponded to certain injuries that might cause you to look for other things, you really didn't have an opportunity to see those things, right?
yes, I did not see the clothes.
Okay, picture 619, please. I'm showing you what's been marked as exhibit number 619, which has previously been introduced in evidence. This is a gold sweater, and you can see that it's cut all the way through on the front of the sweater.
Yes, I see that.
Okay, but you never saw that before your examination.
No,
And I'm going to show you what has been marked as picture number exhibit number, 640. And this is I guess, a blue and white button-up shirt. Is it fair to say that? Blue or grayish? It's a little hard to see the color.
yes,
And you can see that shirt on this photograph has been cut in the center area of
yes,
the shirt, right? And there appears to be what could be, and I'm not saying you should say it should be, but like mud or blood on the shirt.
yes,
And you never saw that either.
I did not see that.
And now I'm going to show you what's been marked as exhibit number 639. And fair to say that's a t-shirt.
Yes,
And that was also an item of clothing you had not been shown.
yes, I had not been shown that.
And on that item of clothing on the t-shirt, under the tiger, there's a kind of a reddish mark, which could be blood, but you don't know, right?
Right, I
Do
don't
you-
know that.
Also see the little area that's circled?
Yep, I see that.
Okay, and if it's going to help you, I'm going to just show you the actual picture because it's pretty hard to see on the screen. In the area that's circled, actually, it's much easier to see here than where I was. The area that's circled appears to be a defect to the material or a small cut into the fabric, right?
Yes,
But you weren't aware of that either.
no, I was not.
So finally, I'm going to show you what has been marked as exhibit number 641. And this is a picture of Ms. McCandless's abdomen. Do you see a small scratch on her abdomen?
Yes, I do.
And that appears to be in the same position, or it's close by where the defect was to the fabric on the previous picture of the t-shirt, right?
Yeah, that could be.
Okay. And you did not note that in your report?
No, I did not.
Okay, that's pretty small, right?
Yes,
Fair to say, if you had been aware that there had been a cut to the t-shirt, you might have noticed that as well, even though you did not.
Objection, speculative.
Overruled. You can answer.
yes, I might have looked a little harder, but I know I visualize, with her consent and with being appropriate, the whole body, we're constantly looking for injuries.
Sure, and I'm not trying to be critical or
Sure.
anything. It's just, it's very small, and that's something that can be easily overlooked if you don't have information about the potential for some kind of small scratch there.
Yeah.
Right, I mean, that's not a laceration like the other things. It hasn't necessarily been cut into. It's more of a scratch, right?
Correct.
So just like you didn't particularly note scratches on the lip, but they were there, it's like that, that you didn't note the small scratch to the abdomen.
Yes, I did not note that.
Okay, thanks. Now, when Ms. McCandless spoke with you about what occurred, you've already recited that she said she was sitting in their car with Alex. She didn't remember, right?
Yes,
She didn't know if she'd been sexually assaulted, but she was guessing as to whether or not she had been.
I don't recall her ever guessing. She just didn't give me much information, and I tried to get more information, but
Well, in your report, you noted that when asked if sexually assaulted, she said both, I don't know, and also, I guess I was raped at hers.
yes,
So that was guesswork on her part.
exactly. Yeah,
And she couldn't give you any description, but she said she'd been with Alex the last she remembered. Before that, she'd been with Jason, right?
correct.
And she said she had been at Owen Park with Jason, and then he left and she was hanging out with Alex. She told you that,
Yes,
but she didn't give you specific details about whether she was in fact at Owen Park with Alex or not. That wasn't something she said. She just said she'd been there with Jason, and then later she was with Alex.
yes,
So her inability, and of course she could not recall how she got to a farmer's house covered in mud.
yes,
Now, you have specific questions you ask when a patient comes in for a Sane exam that are done in an effort to help the person recall, right?
yes,
And I think you said when the person doesn't recall, their job is to follow up. Your job, I'm sorry, not their job. Your job is to follow up.
yes,
And this is something you've been specifically trained on, correct?
yes,
I see that you've gone to a number of different trainings to become a Sane nurse, and it's because the training has to be specialized as compared to other particular jobs that an RN may do in a hospital setting.
correct.
And one of the things that you have learned is that it's not uncommon for sexual assault victims to not recall what's happened.
Correct. Yes,
And it's very common for them not to remember the order in which things have happened.
yes.
And it's very common for them to not recall, but later be able to reconstruct their memory a couple of days later.
right.
And that is not an unusual response to trauma.
Correct. It's not.
And you would agree with me that different people handle trauma differently,
Yes.
right? It all just depends on who the person and the patient is.
Yes.
And you give them the same care and consideration, regardless of whether they can recall or not recall what specifically happened.
Yes.
You're going to give them the exact same treatment, the exact same examination, because people do recall things later, right?
Yes.
And just because somebody doesn't recall something doesn't mean they're not a victim of an attack.
Correct.
Now, when you examined Ms. McCandless, Dr. Tillotson was in the room at the outset of the examination.
Yes, he was in when I did the vaginal area and the peri area, because we some of the doctors want to be in there to make sure there's no trauma, bleeding, and he is one that always wants to be in there when we're doing the actual pelvic speculum exam.
Okay, so he wants to be in there, and he is there in his capacity as an emergency room physician
Yes.
for an internal examination.
Yes.
But he didn't stay in the room the entire time.
No.
He was just there for a rather brief period of time.
Yes.
I mean, a typical pelvic takes what, 10 minutes at the most?
At the most. Yes.
Okay, fair to say that that is not the most pleasant part of a Sane exam?
It would probably be the worst part of it.
Yes, and also looking at the anus as well would be an uncomfortable part for a patient.
For the patient, yes, definitely.
Yes, and when we said the worst part of exam, by the way,
I meant for the patient.
yeah, I meant the patient too. Okay.
Yes.
So we're on the same page there. Now, were you aware of her being given any prescribed medication in the hospital?
The report that I had received was she had the IV in place and that she had been given Zofran for nausea, but that was before I got there.
Okay, so that's the only medication you were aware of that she had received prior to your examination?
Yes.
And is it typical that other medications may be given after a Sane examination?
Yes.
And that's because that medication can eventually end up in the blood, and one might not know where the medication came from when a toxicology exam is done later, whether a medication was given at the hospital or prior to coming to the hospital. That's a possibility, right?
Yes. Hopefully they've charted the medication they've given too, so we have it on record.
Of course.
Right.
Of course. Now, Now but what you do know is there was an IV inserted into her and that she'd been given this one anti-nausea medication.
Yes,
And it's fair to say that Zofran is very effective as a medication to prevent nausea and vomiting in a patient.
yes,
And that's why it's given, and it's particularly effective if you give it intravenously.
yes,
So you don't have to wait until it goes from the GI or gastrointestinal system into the bloodstream that way.
yes,
Now, while Ms. McCandless did not remember what occurred to her, it's fair to say she was cooperative with the examination.
yes, she was.
She gave you consent to do everything, which was her choice, right?
Yes,
She signed medical releases so law enforcement could get all of her medical records, right?
yes,
And that was her choice.
yes,
You certainly didn't pressure her into that.
no,
And she also consented to having all these photographs taken, right?
yes,
Including to sensitive and personal areas, private areas of her body, right?
yes,
And you didn't pressure her into that either.
no,
So she was cooperative to the extent that she was able to be during the examination.
yes.
I don't have any further questions.
Can you redirect?
Yes. Ms. Morris, when you had asked the patient if she had been strangled, what was her response?
Unknown.
And did you examine the patient's eyes?
Yes.
And what do you look for strangulation when you look at a patient's eyes?
We look for bleeding, their little petechial hemorrhages in the eyes, so the whites of the eyes would become red and bloodshot.
And did you notice any petechiae in her eyes?
No,
And also, when you look at the neck for potential strangulation, do you look at bilateral, both sides of the neck?
yes,
And did you notice any red marks on the left side of the neck?
no,
Did you notice any finger marks or hand imprints?
I did not.
All of the, I guess, injuries you examined on the defendant, did you need to bandage any of them?
I did not. All the bleeding was controlled.
Were any stitches needed or glue?
Not that I am aware of. When I was there, we didn't do any stitches or glue.
You were shown a picture of the right outer thigh that had some linear lacerations. Do you recall that picture? Do you want me
Yes.
to- No, that's all right. And you were asked whether those were puncture wounds or dried blood. Remember that?
Yes.
What did you believe that to be when you examined her?
When I was looking at it, it appeared to be dried blood.
And you were asked a number of questions about, let me go back to, you were shown a picture of a small scratch on the, I guess, abdomen area. Is that right?
Yes.
Do you know when that photograph was taken?
I don't. It didn't look like I took it. It didn't have the same
Sure.
ruler.
And as far as you recall, when you examined the patient's body on March 22nd, 2018, do you recall observing that little scratch?
I do not.
And you were asked that you arrived around 7:20, is that right?
Yes.
And would it have been possible for the defendant to be alone at any time before you arrived?
It could have been possible. I wasn't there, so I can't definitely answer that question if she was alone in the room at all.
And you were asked some questions about clothes that may have been the defendant's.
Yes.
Do you know how those clothes got torn?
I do not.
So it's possible for a person to cut those clothes themselves?
It is possible, yes.
And it's also possible for someone else to cut them.
Yes.
You just don't know.
I don't know.
And that's not your job.
No.
What was your job?
To help the patient navigate through this process and collect evidence, determine if there were any injuries.
I have no further questions.
Any requests?
Yeah, I have a little bit. You were asked right away about strangulation. Now, we all agree that strangulation doesn't necessarily leave marks, right?
Yes.
Okay. And just as it doesn't necessarily leave marks, strangulation doesn't always cause petechiae, and I think I should probably spell that. Petachie. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay. It doesn't always cause petechiae in the eyes, correct?
I'm not an expert at what the ones that I have seen have caused petechiae.
Okay. So you're not an expert, but have you ever been advised that it may or may not? It
Yes.
would depend on the amount of force that would be used, correct? That's been in your training.
Correct.
So what you've seen, let me just say this, if you think this is fair. When you go to training, you have the accumulated knowledge over a large body of patients who you will never see that many patients in your life, right?
Correct.
And so the person who does the training has accumulated all this data and all this knowledge about stuff, and they're passing the information on to you so you're aware of it.
Yes.
And what you personally see in your practice is a much smaller subset of what occurs, right?
Yes.
So when you've been taught that there's not necessarily, when you've been taught at a training, excuse me, that there's not necessarily fatigue EI, that comes from that much wider body of knowledge of people who studied many more patients than obviously you're ever going to get the chance to do, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you would have no reason to disagree with what you've been taught in your training. Fair?
Yes, that's fair.
All right. Now, you also know strangulation is actually kind of what's called a form of asphyxia, correct?
Yes.
And that can cause, while it's happening, problems for the patient in terms of more than just leaving a red mark on somebody's neck. Fair to say?
That's fair to say, yes.
And that can include potentially inability to breathe,
Yes.
hyperventilation, right?
Yes.
It can include vision changes while it's going on, such as blurred vision.
Yes.
It can include what one might call tunneling, or, one doesn't like see peripherally while it's going on.
Yes.
That's fair to say, right? It can cause dizziness.
Yes.
It can cause memory loss, short term
Yes.
and long term as well for some people, right?
Yes.
And it can cause lightheadedness, right?
Yes.
Because when that's happening, basically what's going on is there's a lack of oxygen to the brain.
Correct.
Okay. And that's what causes all of these symptoms that we're talking about.
Yes.
I don't have anything further.
Okay. You may step down. And is Ms. Morris?
Yes.
Here you go.
Judge, I'm sorry, I neglected to move in the following exhibits into evidence: 638, 637, 635, 636, 619, I think was already in evidence, but I'm also offering 639, 640, and 641, which are all going to come in at a later time. So I was thinking we might as well just move them in now.
They may be in a different format. Any objection from the stage? There may be some duplication, but it's referred to in this exam or this examination as those numbers. So
The only objection is to that last photograph that I don't believe there's a proper foundation for.
okay,
That would
well,
be 641.
641. Well, I will receive 635, 636, 637, 638, 619, 640, and 639. And I'll just, we'll just reserve ruling on 641. I assume there will be additional testimony regarding 641 at a later time, but I won't receive that at this time.
Thank you.
All right. And is Ms. Morris free to go?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Morris. Have a good day.
Okay, so a little bit of uncomfortable testimony there, but brief. I'm telling you guys, the first part of it was even more uncomfortable, and so I'm glad I didn't subject you guys to that, because I had a struggle, especially because, okay, I think pretty much all of you guys are familiar with the with Michael Long, right, and that situation, and what what happened there. And so when the Sane nurse was going through step by step what all is involved in a Sane exam, I mean, it was too much for even me, and I'm a monster. So yeah, it was a lot. I thought that the prosecution did a good job of getting out what they wanted to get out, but I thought that the defense in this situation was actually a little bit more effective than the prosecution was, only because I think that I will say this before I say what they did well. The one thing I didn't understand, their point is to make this big deal about her not asking for pain meds. I don't see the connection in that. I mean, I have not yet to hear any testimony. Now, of course, I haven't researched any of this case. I don't have any, but what I didn't understand is were they trying, does it come out at some point, or is it going to come out at some point that Ezra is a an addict of some sort. I don't I don't understand it. I get, yeah, I kind of get that. At the same, like she's saying that she feels, pain at an 8, but didn't really. But I feel like if that were the case, I actually think that the truth of the matter is she didn't want to be given pain medication um, until, I don't know if she was ever given pain medication. I just know at that point she hadn't been. But I feel like because she wanted to keep her wits about her because they were asking her questions. And I think that is, important. And I will say this, and you are right. Everybody does have a different pain threshold. So when I was pregnant with my oldest son, I had really, really, really bad preeclampsia, really bad. And I was given an amniocentesis. And an amniocentesis, obviously, you're pregnant. They don't give you anything for that. Um, it's, I wouldn't say it's painful. I would say it's uncomfortable given what it is. I mean, they do put a needle into your stomach and go through the uterus and then withdraw, amniotic fluid. And my son hit the needle when he was born. He had a little mark on his hand from it. But that's neither here nor there. The point is that there might be some people who would get that same procedure done and not and feel the way I felt, like it was uncomfortable, whereas somebody else might feel like it was the worst pain they've ever experienced in their life. And I think age has something to do with that. I was far more tolerant of pain when I was younger than I am now. So I just don't understand what like they're trying to make such a big deal. It's the defense that's doing it. It's not even really the prosecution. The defense is the one that continuously points out that she didn't ask for pain medication. It's them that keep pointing it out, and I don't understand what the point of that is. But I also thought that the defense was very effective in getting the Sane nurse to admit to certain things that were beyond the scope of her knowledge and education. That she could not say that definitively that Ezra wasn't choked just because there weren't certain signs of it. Do you know what I mean? So I thought they were I just thought with this particular witness that they were the defense was far more effective than the prosecution. And now keep in mind, I've listened to both parts. So if you guys want to listen to part 1 whenever Mo makes it public or whatever, and then we can, then come back tomorrow night and let me know what you guys think. I'd be curious if you guys think the same thing. And now, Amelia, I want popcorn. Oh man. Now I want popcorn, but it's too late. It's like 10 o'clock. I can't be eating after 10 o'clock. Oh, okay. Now I'm distracted. I just thought I thought that she was far more effective at getting her point across without coming across as condescending, because I felt like, and I felt like he was condescending. I felt like sometimes he comes off, as condescending. No, it's okay, Amelia. You were hungry and you needed to eat. I also thought some of the, you guys, if you can, should really watch the first one. I just didn't think it was appropriate for YouTube. That's all. But anyway, because she goes through the questions that she asked Ezra, and just the amount of she, I mean, of course, she documented everything that Ezra told her, but Ezra hardly knew anything. she just was, it was just interesting. Just interesting. Okay. So the next person that's going to testify is, I already forgot her name because it's not, you'll see it when it pops up, but she is a Kelly Swartos. She is a social worker and had direct interaction with Miss Ezra. So let's play her and then discuss. Okay, here we go.
Ms. Swartos, can you state and spell your first and last name for the court reporter, please?
Kelly Swartos, Kelly Swartos.
Ms. Swartos, where do you work?
I work at Mayo Clinic Health Systems in Eau Claire,
How long have you been there?
2 years.
What's your title?
Hold on, I want to. No, it's it's not uncommon in those exams. It's not uncommon in those situations. It's not. What I'm trying to illustrate, I suppose, and I'm not doing a very good job of it. I don't know what's wrong with me today, but anyway, is the fact that it was something that the prosecution highlighted. It was a very important point for them to bring out for the jury that which is why at the end there on recross, Ezra's defense attorney pointed out that Ezra was cooperative through all of this because a Sane exam requires consent from the patient. You can't just perform one. Just because you're the victim of a crime doesn't mean that you don't have rights and that you can't say, I don't want that kind of exam. It's for any reason. But I think that her point was that to counter her evasiveness or unknown, not being able to answer things as less of not invasive, just simply, or evasive, excuse me, just simply she forgot. She actually didn't know the answer at that time, that she wasn't trying to not be cooperative, which I thought was, they made a good point. If it is a minor, I believe that I think it depends on the age of the child. I think that the younger the child is, then it's up to the parent or the guardian of the child. I think the older the child, like, 14, 15, 16, 17, I would think that their consent is required, but ultimately it is the parent or the guardian that gives permission, and it probably varies by state. So crazy. All right, here we go.
I'm a social worker.
Have you been a social worker anywhere else prior to that?
Prior to that, I was a hospice social worker at a local hospice agency.
May I approach?
You may.
Just show you what's marked as Exhibit 184. Do you recognize what that is?
I do.
What is that?
I
My
agree
resume?
with that, Allie.
And is
CV?
that-
Mhm.
Sorry, go ahead.
My CV.
Is that a reasonably up-to-date or completely up-to-date, accurate copy of your resume?
It is.
And that includes some of the additional locations where you were a social worker, correct?
Correct.
All right. Were you working March 23rd, 2018?
I was.
Did you have an opportunity to treat Ezra McCandless?
I did.
And the purpose of that was to do an initial assessment, correct?
Correct.
And that was at Mayo Hospital?
Correct.
Sorry, you guys. My chat is loading so weird, both on StreamYard and on YouTube. I'm really annoyed with it. I wanted to highlight something. Let's see. It was before this. Sorry, you guys. Oh, Max, you asked if, and I can't find it, babe, but you asked if Ezra was claiming that or made an outcry of SA. And the truth is, she actually did not. She said she did not know if she had, whether she had been. So, yeah. So she didn't actually make an outcry. What she said was that she didn't know, but that she was in pain down there, basically. So, and yes, nonstop mom, you're correct. I think that there are different types of exams given, and they do have an obligation to report. And I think it depends a lot on the circumstances. If you are a parent bringing a child in, I think that I'm not exactly 100% sure how they handle it. So I'm not really going to speak on it. That's what the Googles is for, because I don't know. I don't actually know for sure. For sure.
Is part of that making sure that a patient in general, or in this case, Ms. McCandless, is comfortable?
Yes.
Did the patient that day provide you information about actually the day before? So March 22nd, 2018?
Not to my recollection.
Did she provide you information about what led her to being at the hospital?
Yes.
Did she tell you where she started the day that led her to the hospital?
She reported to me that she started the day at her dad's house.
Did she tell you where she ended up?
She reported that she ended up on a farmer's property.
Did she tell you how she got there?
She indicated that she had driven. It was implied. Can I correct myself?
Sure.
It was implied that she had driven there,
And what do you mean by it was implied?
because one of the questions I had asked her was where her vehicle was at the time we were speaking, and she didn't know.
So she told you she didn't remember where her car was, or didn't know where her car was?
That's correct.
Did she tell you what she told the homeowner at the farm where she ended up?
She told him that she was raped.
That's what she told you that she told him?
That's correct.
Did you ask her if she, or did she tell you what happened between the time that she implied, that you assumed that she drove there and when she ended up at the farmer's house? Did she tell you what happened in that meantime?
I don't recall.
Did she acknowledge past self-harm?
She did.
Did you specifically talk with her about injuries specific to the time that she was in the hospital? Injuries that she currently had at that time?
She reported to us that the injuries that she had, that were the current injuries, were from a recent sexual assault.
And when you say recent, does that mean right before she entered the hospital?
Yes,
Specifically, let's talk about, she had injuries on her thighs, is that correct?
that is correct.
And did she tell you who made those injuries, who was responsible for those injuries?
That would be the person who she told us attacked her.
Did she have injuries on her left arm? On one of her arms, if you don't know
Yes.
specifically? And did she tell you the same thing? It was the person who attacked her?
Yes.
Did she ever tell you that she self-inflicted those injuries either to her thighs or to her arm?
No.
Nothing further. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Gashey?
Ms. Swartos, when you did your assessment, never mind, I'll just ask questions. When you did an assessment of Ms. McCandless, you ended up having some kind of electronic medical record or report that was created?
Correct.
And that information that got typed into that record, is this something that you typed yourself?
It is.
All right, I guess I'll get this marked. And I just want to make sure that this is yours. 1 minute, first it's giving me the exhibit number. It starts with DOJ 941.
Through what page?
I think the report itself goes, 1 second, come over there. I'm just going to show you it's been marked as exhibit number 644 and make sure that that's the report that you generated, the electronic medical record.
Okay.
Is that accurate?
It is.
So one of the things that you noted in the report was that Ms. McCandless was very easily tearful.
Yes,
And was she tearful when she talked to you?
she was.
Okay. Now, the other thing that she said to you, well, let me just ask this. What you just testified, there's a section of your report, and I can show it to you if you need me to refresh your memory. It's called impressions, right? And you have to say yes for the
Yes.
record. Sorry. So in the section that you call impression, that's your memory of what she told you, right?
Correct.
So it doesn't mean it's a word-for-word transcription of what Ms. McCandless said?
That's correct.
And are you sitting at a computer typing while you're talking to her, or are you interacting with her and typing this up later?
I'm interacting with her and typing that up
Right.
later.
Right, not very friendly to be sitting staring at a computer screen while talking to a patient, right?
Correct.
And in fact, fair to say that's kind of a common complaint about going to the doctor these days, is they're more involved with their computer screen than with you as a person, right?
Correct.
So that thing that people sometimes do of looking at a computer screen is not the way you would interact with another human being in your job as a licensed and trained social worker.
Correct.
You want to make the person feel comfortable with you, right?
I do.
But nonetheless, you're not able to then go, because you're not taking notes contemporaneously, you're not able to go and put in your computer exactly word for word what the patient said, right?
That is true.
So when you say that the person who attacked her, injured her, that doesn't necessarily mean that she used the word rape with you at all, right?
Correct.
You can't say that, but she did, right? You can't say that she used it.
I can't say today that she used the word rape that day.
Okay, but you do know that she definitely said she had been attacked by somebody.
That is true.
That you're sure about, right? She also talked to you, she told you she had a loss of memory, right?
She did.
And, but at this particular juncture, were you aware that there were more details she was remembering than what she had said the day before in the emergency room, or you just didn't know anything about that?
I didn't know very much about that at that time.
And these injuries to her legs that you're talking about, you didn't like have her disrobe and examine them, did you?
I did not.
That's not your job. You're not a doctor.
That's correct.
And that's, the medical people take care of that. That's not what you're supposed to do, right?
That's correct.
You are a social worker, right?
I am.
So you've learned about traumas, certainly.
Yes.
And in your job, as you've learned about trauma, you learned that different people respond to trauma differently.
True.
And that some people, in fact, have amnesia with trauma, right?
Yes.
And there's even different kinds of amnesia that people get. Some is permanent, some is temporary. Is that right?
That's true.
And often people who've been through trauma and have had amnesia or have had a certain response to trauma do recover their memories later, right?
Yes.
Have you gone to advanced training about that?
Not in particularly, no.
Okay, so you didn't go to the training in Wisconsin that was done by Dr. Hopper from out east, did you?
I did not.
And you're also aware that sometimes people who've had trauma don't necessarily want to talk about it, right?
Correct.
And it can be kind of difficult for people like that when they're in the hospital. They're being asked lots of questions by lots of people, right?
Correct.
A teaching hospital?
It is not.
Okay, so at least you don't have to talk to the medical students coming in, right?
True.
But there's interns and residents who sometimes come through with doctors, right?
Sometimes.
There's nurses, correct?
Yes.
There's medical technicians.
Yes.
There's physician's assistants.
Yes.
There's all kinds of people talking to you when you're in the hospital, right?
Yes.
And also when you're in the hospital, a lot of times people wake you up in the middle of the night to take your vital signs, right?
They do.
And although this is all good and necessary from the medical point of view, in fact, when you're a patient, it can seem very intrusive,
Yes.
right? So even though I'm sure you were really nice in all of your dealings, from the point of view of the patient, sometimes the questioning could be, they may feel that it's intrusive, and that's a
Objection
normal
calls for
feeling.
speculation.
Sustained.
Okay, so in any event, you do know that it's not uncommon for patients who you talk to not want to always tell you everything, right?
Yes.
And many people will decide, look, I'm just not ready to talk about this, and they're not going to tell you, right?
Correct.
Now, one of the things that Ms. McCandless did tell you was that she had some history of post-traumatic stress disorder, right?
Yes.
She told you she'd gone to a counselor for post-traumatic stress disorder.
That's correct.
And she said this all came about when she was much younger after being in a serious car accident where a horse bolted it from an Amish buggy and flew through the window of her car, right?
That's correct.
And although luckily she wasn't seriously physically injured, emotionally that left her with certain scars.
Correct.
And she had post-traumatic stress disorder as a result, right?
That's what she reported.
Right. And she also told you that those memories can make her anxious when she's driving.
Correct.
She said also that she was involved in something in February where she overdrank at a friend's house.
That's
right?
correct.
And when she drank to excess, she told you that she had actually woken up and was in the middle of sexual intercourse, right?
That's correct.
Now, sometimes when people use alcohol, they also have blackouts, right?
I do know that.
And
Yes.
they can appear to be completely conscious to another person but have no memory of what's going on, right?
Correct.
So even in sexual assault cases, sometimes that person can appear to be conscious and consenting, but not have any memory, and later wake up and think that something happened to them that shouldn't have.
Correct.
Right? Now, she's not the one who used the word post-traumatic stress disorder. That's your word in the report, isn't it?
I don't recall if she used the word. I know I did chart the term PTSD.
Because that's a diagnostic term.
It is.
And so being a diagnostic term for you, that's basically a term of art, so to speak, or a scientific term.
Correct.
Okay. Which the common ordinary person may not know that term, right?
Correct.
And I guess, just to be clear, so everybody understands, that means post-traumatic stress disorder.
Correct.
Okay. I don't have anything further.
Can you redirect?
Briefly, at first, I think I failed to move in Exhibit 184. I do that now if I did fail to do that.
No objection.
All right, 184 will be received.
You have some training in trauma, correct?
I do.
Does that cause people to lie?
It does not.
You said that the word raped may not have been what was specifically said to you. Did the defendant tell you that the attack was sexual?
Yes.
Now, there was some question about people being woken up in the middle of the night and poked and prodded. Your interview didn't happen in the middle of the night, did it?
It did not.
Nothing further.
Any recross?
No, I haven't had it.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bordeaux. You may step down.
Could you tell us your name, please, and spell your name for the court reporter?
My name is Corey Reeves. First is Cory, last is Reeves.
And how are you employed, sir?
I work as a patrol officer for the City of Eau Claire Police Department.
How long have you worked for the City of Eau Claire Police Department as a patrol officer?
Just over 5 years.
And were you working for the City of Eau Claire as a patrol officer in March of 2018?
Yes, I was.
Sorry, you guys. Whew. That's for maybe I'll watch him tomorrow, and I don't remember what he is going to, I didn't watch him yet, so I don't know what he's going to testify over, but I was not by the desk because I had to let Nestor out, and so I thought I had time, but I didn't have time because he was slow walking it. But anyway, okay. So, I thought that testimony was interesting because, she did deal with Ezra in a different capacity than a doctor or a nurse, in that she's trained to deal with people and victims. And so I thought that her testimony was important. And I do think that the prosecution scored a couple of points there at the very end on the redirect when they asked about will trauma cause you to lie, which I thought was interesting. And when you say she also brought up PTSD, are you saying Ezra brought up PTSD, or are you saying the social worker brought up PTSD? I know you're at work, but I just want to be clear about who the she is. Probably not. Sugar bait, probably not. But maybe, you never know. You know how family trees can be. But yeah, I thought, okay, well, whether it was Ezra, that you're saying Ezra brought it up, or the social worker brought it up. Well, yes, the social worker, she's the one that wrote it down. Okay. But so when a social worker is making notes and charting. Different social workers have different ways of doing it. And some take the approach of they just listen and they don't write anything down while the patient is talking or the client, because that's their approach. They feel like, and I get it too, because if I were speaking to somebody and I was telling them my story, especially of a traumatic event, and I felt that wouldn't feel like I was being heard if they were busy writing. So I feel like, but what she also what the social worker actually testified to is that she can't sit there today and say that Ezra used the term PTSD, that she may have used some other term, because that the social worker wrote it down in her impressions, which is not like verbatim. I mean, sometimes it can be, but that's not her technique. So it's not clear really. Anyway, it's not clear really whether Ezra is the one that used the term PTSD or whether the social worker did. But I'm sure they're going to get into it more, because obviously the defense is going to bring in their own psychologist or to testify, who have evaluated Ezra and stuff like that. So I'm sure we'll get to the, we'll get down to it, whether Ezra had been diagnosed with something like that in the past, and she was simply repeating it to the social worker and, repeating the exact diagnosis, which would be PTSD, or if something that Ezra said to her during that interview made her, the social worker, think that she was referring to PTSD. So I guess we'll find out. But anyway, that is all that I've got for tonight. We don't actually, if the way we're doing it now, we don't have that many more people to go before we get to, hold on a second. Before we get to, what in the heck? Before we get to Jason. He's down the list. She's been working. Where's Kenny? And so she's been really busy. So hopefully whenever it gets time for the like other psychologists and stuff to start talking, she'll be able to be available. And yes, Mo, I know, babe. You told me 3 times yesterday, and I told you I promised that I would. I promise. I just want to skip through like the minutia, unless the detectives, I don't want to, like, the detectives, if we would have done it the way we've been doing it, right? These detectives were only testifying about the procedure for collecting forensic evidence, what programs they used. But they never actually talked about what digital evidence was revealed. That's and we would have been listening to, that was like an hour and a half testimony altogether. But I promise you that I'm going to do the dad. I promise. Overruled. Oh, wait, I'm going to put that back up there. Thank you, Max 2002. I appreciate that. Yes, I promise I will. Ezra 20, I think she had just turned 20. She was 19 or 20. I'll have to look it up. So anyway, that's all I got for tonight. But I will definitely do what I did today, tomorrow. And then I will then we'll pick up tomorrow night where we left off, with the more interesting and pertinent testimony. So, are you sure she was 19, Mo? Because when the Sane nurse exam, when she first testified, I could have sworn she said 20. I'm going to look her up. Well, yeah, nonstop mom. Like they talk about how smart they are and all their credentials and stuff. And look, they have earned their education and they've worked hard for it and it should be acknowledged. But when you're trying to listen to a trial like that and there's a lot to listen to, it's a lot. Hold on. I'm going to look up because I could have sworn that she testified that she was 20. Hold on. Well, her birthday is October 6, 1997. All right, hold on. I'm going to bust out this calculator. So she would have been 20 when it happened. I think when she did say but then I think when, you're right, Mo, but then when they got her into the hospital and they got more of her vital statistics. Then, I just did 1997 minus 2018, and that got me to 21 because technically she would not have been 21 yet in March. She would have been 20. She would have turned 21 that October. Exactly, nonstop mom. Like, can we listen? That's what they do. All that pretrial stuff that happens that we don't really see is where they proffer them as a expert witness, and the state, when they put their their witnesses on and they have a debate back and forth, and most of the time they don't really, they agree that these people are, there are certain situations though where they will debate it back and forth, but most of the time everybody agrees that they're experts in their field and that they qualify as an expert to testify in this trial, and they just move on. So yeah. I'm not buying her amnesia either. I think it's what's the word I'm looking for? Convenient amnesia. But anyway, so I'm going to end it for tonight. I want to thank everybody for being here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for everybody that joined memberships. I appreciate it always, always. And I will see you guys back here tomorrow night. All right. Okay, bye. You guys all take care and behave out on these